In today's video, I want to address something that's on a lot of renovators' minds, including my own, when we began work on this 1930s house renovation. And that is the fear of making wrong or expensive layout decisions that you'll later come to regret. I know that many of my clients, and also some of you watching this, will be considering rear or side extensions to maximise your property's footprint, spending around the six-figure mark to get it all finished. And that doubtful thought, will the final result be worth the investment I'm making, will keep popping up into your heads. Well, I have some thoughts around this that I want to share with you to help you make these really important decisions and feel really confident that you won't suffer regrets later on, including some thought-provoking questions to ask yourself before you commit to those large-scale projects and a new property layout in this next phase of your life. Towards the end of the video, stay tuned because I'll also be answering an interior design clinic submission that came in from a lady called Laura, who's based up in Liverpool, and she spent years deliberating whether to do a large extension on her home or a more modest knock-through in her 1930s house. I'll be offering up some suggestions on how to make the most of her layout and her budget. I have to say that this topic is really close to my heart because Neil and I ditched our kitchen extension plans right at the very last minute after spending nearly £4,000 on the plans for it. So if you've been following us for a while, you'll know all about it, but I'll leave a link to the blog post for you to read. We shared how we feel 5 years after making this fundamental decision and whether we regret it or not. Little cliffhanger for you. Go check it out. Okay, so let's jump onto my machine here, and I'll hopefully start to help you make some important layout decisions for your home. So I'm going to hazard a guess that you're about to take on a renovation, your budget isn't huge, and it really needs to stretch as far as possible without compromising on the overall finish. But what you're just not sure about is whether your budget will stretch to that glossy extension idea that you've had, alongside the rest of the improvements that you want to make to your property. When Neil and I were in your shoes, we had the exact same goals. So we had a modest budget, we really wanted everything finished to a high standard, and we wanted to achieve our dream space comfortably within budget, and ultimately be left with no regrets, just feelings of pride and elation about the new home that we'd created for us and our families to spend time together in. What nobody tells you though is that yes, alongside gathering information about renovation costs, the feasibility of your property, your ceiling price and what your needs are as a household, actually self-discovery is a really important part of the renovation process, and it gets really overlooked, but we found it to be one of the most important areas of renovation planning, especially if you're about to commit to an expensive layout decision like extending your home. So tip number one, start with your existing footprint first. I really don't like to push people into bolting on extensions if it's at all possible to use the existing structure and you have more budget left over than to finish the interior to a really high standard. So really think about this if this is something that you're up against. What if you worked with what you have and remodelled areas? Like, could it give you what you need from the house? When I come to plan layouts for clients, I usually start with the exterior four walls and remove all the internal walls just on an app like SketchUp, and then play around with the layouts and see what can be achieved without having to add space. It's single-handedly the easiest way to keep your project more affordable, and you might actually be surprised by what you can achieve with a simple remodel. So yeah, my advice is to always explore this option and exhaust all your initial layout ideas first. Tip number two is what's really important to you. When budgets are that bit tighter, I've found in some projects that a little bit of a reality check is tough but very much called for. It's always beneficial for the progress of a project to understand and decide on what's more important to you. Is it adding space or is it having a really great design? And whilst I would love to tell people that their budgets can stretch to both, the reality for a lot of people, including myself and Neil, is that it just might not. So you need to be truthful to yourself early on and really consider what is more important before you get too far into your plans and realise that you're not going to actually end up getting what you want, something's compromising. Is it that you would rather add 5 metre squared to the back of the house and then perhaps make a saving with lower end design choices that you can probably add to later over the years? Or is it more important to you to rework your existing layout, get it as nice as or as flowing as an extension would, and actually have the finished result with, like show home levels of beauty, a fine quality kitchen that you've been dreaming about, the exact flooring that you want, all the tiles and lighting that you want. Renovations are all about balance and compromise, and the sooner you become clear about what features will make you feel really happy in your home, the sooner you'll make the right decisions with no regrets later on. And tip number 3 is to check in and ask yourself, are you choosing to extend for the right reasons? Something I really try to be wary of in my personal life is whether my decisions are status driven or rooted in any way in materialism or comparison. Because so-and-so has an extension, I want one, or some similar thoughts like that. And you don't need me to tell you that external pressure or comparison is never a good reason to go ahead with it. It's really important to recognise when you're making design decisions based on what you've seen other people do versus what's actually important for you and your family. Neil and I often go for a walk and we'll ask each other questions, like, do you really, really want it? Is this coming from Instagram envy? What's really important for you and your family or your household right now? And sorry to get really heavy on you, but if you died tomorrow, would you be satisfied with your decisions? Listen to your inner guidance telling you what you need from your home, not magazines, not Pinterest, and not friends, family or neighbours' homes either. And with that, I would actually say that some great reasons to extend might be if you know it's going to add value to your property in the long term. The current layout is definitely too narrow or too small for the number of people living in the property, so you're future-proofing the house for, say, family living. Or if the property is currently very dark, lacking in natural light, and feels quite oppressive to be in, by extending and bringing in more natural light into the house, then you could actually drastically change the usability of it. So there are just a few reasons. There's probably a whole host more. We all have different needs and desires for our homes. And then I'd say that the not so great reasons to extend are if you want to make the house as big as you can. It is such a giant fib whenever anyone tells you bigger houses are in any way better. It's society that sort of drives this message. They're more expensive to design, they're more expensive to heat, and can be harder to design and fill with the right storage and furniture if your budget's low. And personally, I would sooner a more modest sized house, designed very well, than a big house that feels really unfinished. So it's just some thoughts to think about for your situation. Another not so great reason could be if you want to add a downstairs toilet or an extra living area. I don't mean, adding a downstairs toilet is a bad idea. Not at all. It's a fantastic idea. And if you can do that, if your property doesn't have one, then that's great. Try and get one added in. But it's if your current configuration won't allow for it, that's the reason to extend. So what I strongly urge you to do is work with an architect or interior designer who can try layout configurations to actually include the addition of a downstairs loo, or open up the existing living spaces that might not currently be used, and see if this really helps the flow and the usability of the whole home. And if it doesn't, or if you can't factor in a small downstairs toilet, then that's when you start to bring out the extension planning. Hope that makes sense. Also, if you'd like to make an existing conservatory or lean-to more weathertight and feel like more of a part of the building, not all properties can, but some properties can get away with making minor improvements and repurposing the space to become a really useful area of the house. We actually turned our lean-to into a utility room, which really works for us. Okay, it's not perfect and it is a little bit of an eyesore at the back of the house, but doing this meant that we could spend more money on the areas that were higher priority for us to finish well, so areas like our kitchen and our living spaces. So next, I just want to jump into this interior design clinic submission that Laura from Liverpool sent in to me. I thought it would be a really interesting one, particularly for this video, because Laura's actually been up against this exact decision, unsure about whether to extend or not, and how to lay out her property if she decides to not extend. And she's feeling like really crippled with fear in case she regrets any of her decisions. So it's really relatable to a lot of people. And Laura said, "Dear Fee, I'm at that point with my kitchen where we're about to spend a lot of money, but I'm terrified I made the wrong decisions and will end up regretting it when it's too late. I live with my husband and 3 grown-up children in a 1930s semi very similar to your own. We've been here for 18 years and not done any serious work, so as you can imagine, it's looking pretty tired, especially the kitchen diner. The dining room is lovely and bright and is the most used space in the house. The kitchen side is so poorly planned and has very little worktop space. I have spent hours and hours over the last few years looking at beautiful kitchens on Instagram and convinced myself we needed an extension. Just when I thought we could finally afford my dream extension, COVID hit. So now we're in the situation that the cost is once again out of our reach. I signed up for your course and it was you that made me realise we didn't have to extend and we could switch the kitchen and dining room around to give us a bigger open plan kitchen with the island that I've been dreaming about. That's amazing. I know the kitchen design I want. It's the layout which is giving me nightmares. I'm worried that I'm trying to squeeze in too much and it's going to end up looking cramped. Any advice you give me, I'd be so grateful." Well, thank you so much for your submission, Laura. What an exciting time for you redeveloping your property after so many years living there, especially now that your kids have all grown up, so you can really make this space your own. What I think is so great about your decision making, despite COVID obviously giving you a bit of an unwelcome steer initially, is that you're spending time really considering what is best for your budget and your lifestyle. This is where every project should start. Keep in mind how much you're comfortable to spend and what is realistic for you to achieve, because the last thing you want is to have your money all hoovered up really, really fast by an extension that's not actually finished or to the standard that you were hoping for. So these are some pics that Laura sent in. I definitely think that opening up your existing kitchen and creating an L-shaped room and then swapping the kitchen and dining room locations is going to make this space feel bigger and flow so much better. And I think what you'll find is that light will end up bouncing around the whole space much better. So your new dining room will very much be a used and loved part of the home, even if the current kitchen feels a bit cramped currently. You sent in this really brilliant layout idea for your kitchen, and for viewers, this was done by Laura on the DIY Kitchens 3D Planner, which is a really intuitive and free tool to use. I often use it myself for some really quick visuals just to send over to clients. It has its limitations, but it's a really good one if you're new to any kind of 3D visualising. In terms of your kitchen layout and preventing any layout regrets, there's so much advice that I can give, but I'll try to keep it short and punchy and start with some general tips for you. So the first thing I would say is to double check all of your dimensions. If you're worried about whether a kitchen or dining room plan is going to be too cramped, then there are measurements available and to hand as a really good rule of thumb that you can keep referring back to. And I know you mentioned you're part of our online course, so you should be able to access my common household measurements guide to refer back to. It's basically what I use when I'm drawing plans for clients as well. So just some key measurements that come to mind is to make sure that the space surrounding your island is 1 metre. Some designers say that you can bring it down to 800 millimetres if you need to, particularly on a specific side. But I think it's always best to go too big versus too narrow, especially on the side that faces your cooker and the side facing the units. So yeah, keep plenty of space around it. Then actually see if the island itself is a decent size in width and depth to seat the people that you need. Luckily with the 3D planning tool, it gives you everything to scale. But for anyone that's not using this and they're doing it freehand, a scale drawing, then you need a minimum of 300 millimetres for comfortable knee space when people are sitting, and then each seat needs to be about 600 millimetres. So that's just something to think about. In the dining room, I think if you're concerned whether this space is going to be too tight for the table size that you want, it sort of depends on the chair sizes that you go for, but I'd say keeping 800 millimetres around the circumference of the table, so from the table edge to the wall, or a piece of furniture, that's going to give you enough space to pull in and out fairly comfortably. And also, I would say consider an extendable table, which will give you some extra configurations at Christmas or whenever you're hosting. Also, because your window is currently at sink level, you might find that your window feels a little bit too high in here. It's a bit like our dining room, which used to be a kitchen. Our window sits a little bit higher. And just a space-saving suggestion, if you've got the budget for this, is to try a built-in bench booth. You could bring in panelling to match the kitchen end panels and get the seats upholstered and hinged to have storage underneath it. And that way you can pop in any kitchen mixers or blenders that you don't use often but you still want to keep. The next piece of advice I'd give you is to rehearse your layout. I really, really recommend this, and you'll likely be well aware of this being on the course, but it's such a great way to catch any issues with flow in the early stages. So literally print off the plan that you have here, stand in your current dining room and pretend the kitchen is there in front of you. Try to rehearse basic tasks like chopping up veg, putting them on a baking tray, putting them in the oven, taking them out of the oven and serving up, and note whether you have enough worktop space for resting a hot tray while you get the plates out, or whether you're doing a lot of twisting and turning and things aren't reachable. I mean, ideally, you want a good amount of worktop space directly beside the oven where you've placed a sink at the moment. But if you're happy to use the island as a food prep space, and it's going to be clear of clutter, then you could always twist around and use your island to prepare things on. If you find that you need more worktop space near the island oven, you could also consider moving your sink onto the island, which is a really popular choice nowadays. People that use dishwashers as their main method of washing up get on really well with this, because it means that the sink on the island isn't going to have too many cups and dirty plates all hanging around it. And it's quite a sociable situation, quite a sociable setup. So you're washing up, looking out onto the dining area and the people sitting at the counter. Alternatively, if you're keeping your sink here, then one design idea I had was to invite a reflective splashback, perhaps something mirrored so that you can look out onto the patio or around the room as you wash up. But overall, from a design perspective, I think you've got your focal points really, really right. Choosing to work the chimney breast into your kitchen design will keep a really strong focal point, rather than many people choose to remove the chimney breast completely. But what I tend to do is, when I'm planning for extensions or any new builds, I actually recommend them adding in a faux chimney. So it really gives that kind of focal point around the cooker. And yeah, I think here you're very lucky. You'll be able to create an amazing feeling of shape and a focal point in the room. So just some quick design suggestions to consider. The first is to consider integrating your double fridge. I find that integrated fridges are much more aesthetically pleasing, as the doors will be finished in the same colour as the rest of the kitchen, which sort of allows the eye to circulate the room in a really pleasing way rather than being drawn to the fridge. But I know that a lot of people have their heart set on a double door fridge freezer, like an American style one, so you could also look at giving that an integrated feel with units surrounding the sides or above to utilise the space and get yourself some extra storage there. The next thing that I would suggest is building out your chimney breast or getting your worktop cabinet made bespoke to match the size of the alcoves. At the moment, it looks like you have uneven alcove sizes and the gaps there on either side. Your kitchen fitter is probably going to just use some end panel to fill them in, which will look fine. This is how ours was finished. But I think if I had more budget at the time, and something I look out for when I work on clients' projects, is to have a much more bespoke look. So I would get the worktop pantry cupboard built bespoke to fit the alcove, and that way you're gaining a few extra inches storage and it'll fit really, really well. But alternatively, not all of us have the budget for bespoke units, so you could build out the chimney breast with timber and plasterboard to get the perfect fit. But on the topic of your chimney breast, I would really suggest that you absolutely go for it and make this a stunning feature. Spend the extra on a bespoke solution to conceal an extractor hood and add an amazing, like a mantle with lighting. Get it made for you, specific to the dimensions of the chimney breast. And also you could try asking your contractor about the feasibility of opening up your chimney breast a little bit wider and obviously supporting it with the correct size lintel and building in some concealed storage for oils and spices. I think that looks really smart on either side of the cooker. Yeah, they're just really easily reached and they are a lovely design addition. Overall though, Laura, I think you've absolutely got this. You're doing everything perfectly, deliberating every decision and bringing it into a scaled 3D drawing so that you can visualise how it all looks. And it is a pretty full-on process, you know. It's what keeps me in a job, thankfully. And you do feel overwhelmed at first, but you're making very good ground. Like, this is likely one of your first times doing this. And, you know, I would say that the next steps are just to walk through and rehearse basic tasks to check that you're happy with how it's all flowing, and firm up on your appliances and extraction methods. Make sure you know exactly how they're all going to look before the work starts. But yeah, it's fantastic to see how much heart is going into your project. So keep us all updated on your next phase, you know, choosing the colours, the flooring and the lighting and all of your kitchen and dining room finishes. And just to mention as well at this stage that a lot of people who are renovation course students move on to our Home Design Lab programme if they find that they'd like a little bit more support in design details, because this phase can get quite decision fatigue. So take a look there if you do decide that you want a little bit more help. Okay, that's it from me this week. I really hope that you're all enjoying these videos, and let me know in the comments if you've learned anything from this. I've just popped up on screen the various ways that we can connect, and there's a link in the description to our free taster series if you're renovating and you're eager to get some more support. And thank you all so much for watching. Bye!